Everett Delano joined the Navy in 1941, with most of his service during the Second World War taking place throughout the Pacific Theater. Everett was trained in radio and radio operations, and served at bases across the United States following the end of the war. He married his wife Blanche in 1951, and the couple had a son and 2 daughters. During Everett's post-war service, he was gone for months at a time when he was assigned to ships in the Mediterranean, and his family frequently made long-distance moves as he was transferred from base to base. By 1964, Everett and Blanche wanted more stability in their lives, and Everett decided to retire from the Navy. Everett's extended family mostly lived in and around Orange, Massachusetts, and Blanche's family was in New Hampshire. The Delanos decided to move to Wilmot Flat, New Hampshire, to be close to Blanche's family. Everett's transition to civilian life did not go quite as he had hoped. He had a lot of specialized skills thanks to his years in the Navy, and he thought that perhaps he would be able to find a job repairing radios or even television sets. He could not find such a job in his relatively small town. Since he had left the service to spend more time with his family, he did not want to commute over an hour each way to the nearest larger towns where there may have been more opportunities for him. While he weighed his options for his civilian career, Everett took a job working security overnight at Colby Sawyer College in New London, New Hampshire, and picked up shifts as he could at Sanborn's Garage, a mechanic shop and gas station in Andover, New Hampshire, where he worked in the office and as an attendant, filling customers' cars with gas and accepting their payments. Everett was at Sanborn's Garage on September 1st, 1966. The shop's owner, Kenneth Sanborn, left Everett alone there that day because he had errands to run. Kenneth left at 8:50 that morning, and the register would show that Everett processed 3 payments between that time and 9:25 a.m. At that time, a local woman who knew Everett saw him at the shop and waved to him as she drove by. Everett smiled and waved back to her. A white car pulled up to get gas a short time later, but no attendant came out to fill the tank, so the driver pulled out of the station at 9:45. She shrugged to 2 men who were arriving at the station at that time, indicating she was confused as to why no employees were there. The 2 men looked into the office. They saw a man lying on the floor and heard a sound they thought was snoring, so they believed he had passed out on the floor drunk. 3 more men arrived at 10 o'clock. When one of them looked inside the office, they saw that blood had begun to pool under the man on the floor's head. One of the men went to the Sanborn home, while the others called the state police and the nearest hospital. When Everett was taken to New London Hospital, it was at first believed that he had been badly beaten. However, it was soon realized that he had instead been shot 3 times in the head. His autopsy would find that he had been standing when he was shot the first 2 times, but the 3rd shot had been fired at very close range once he had fallen to the floor. Everett was stabilized, but he remained in critical condition. He was transferred to a larger hospital, but died there of his injuries the following day. He was 49 years old. It appeared that Everett had been killed during a robbery. The money in the cash register, approximately $100, was missing. Everett's killer had not noticed a cash box containing around $500 that was hidden nearby. The water in the sink in the men's restroom had been left running. When Kenneth Sanborn's wife arrived at the station, she luckily realized that whoever shot Everett may have been the person who last turned on the faucet. She therefore went outside to turn off the water to the building at the water pump, leaving the faucet handles undisturbed. A crime scene technician from the state police was able to pull a usable fingerprint from the chrome surface. Everett had been killed with a .22 caliber handgun. State police officers therefore looked into anyone who had registered such a firearm in the area and checked on recent sales of handguns of that caliber. Numerous firearms were collected from members of the community and subjected to ballistics testing, but none of the bullets fired during these tests were a match to the bullets from the crime scene. A nearby river was searched in case the killer had thrown the murder weapon into it, but nothing was found. 6 days after the murder, the clue that would eventually solve the case, the fingerprint lifted from the faucet at the crime scene, was submitted to the FBI to be included in their national database. However, it would be more than 50 years before the case would be closed. The New Hampshire State Police formed a cold case unit in 2009, but Everett's case was not included when they compiled a list of all the unsolved homicides in the state. In 2013, Everett's daughter Darlene was able to get in contact with the unit and ask why her father's case was not being investigated. When the evidence in the case was finally examined, a suspect was identified almost immediately. When the fingerprint from the crime scene had been submitted to the FBI in 1966, fingerprints had to be compared manually. By 2013, the Bureau had long since moved over to using a digital database, known as AFIS. The New Hampshire State Police Forensic Laboratory had begun using AFIS in 1998, but did not run any prints from cases from before that year, unless an agency specifically requested it. When the fingerprint from Everett's case was finally run through AFIS, a match was found. It belonged to a man named Thomas Cass, who had been 20 years old in 1966. Cass had an extensive criminal record. The first of his 13 convictions was in 1966 for larceny, and the last was for manufacturing drugs inside of a federal prison in 2000. The crimes in between ranged from marijuana possession to assault to robbery. He grew up in an abusive home and recreated that environment in his own home once he grew up and got married multiple times. He has been described by multiple people who knew him as a violent person, and he was known to brag about his criminal activities. He had moved to Springfield, Massachusetts in 1966 with his wife and lived there until he went to prison for robbing a gas station in 1967. Investigators met with Cass in October of 2013. They discussed Everett Delano's murder, but did not inform him that his fingerprint had tied him to the crime. Cass claimed to have no knowledge of the crime or even where the town of Andover was. He claimed to have only been to New Hampshire once when he visited Hampton. However, he also acknowledged during that same meeting that in 1971, he had stolen a car in Vermont and driven it into New Hampshire. He had been convicted of 2 counts of robbery in Grafton County, New Hampshire Superior Court in 1972 in connection to this incident. At another meeting in November of 2013, Cass willingly provided a sample of his DNA, but did not agree to take a polygraph examination. On February 20th, 2014, investigators arrived at Cass's home in Orleans, Vermont, unannounced. It was during this interaction that they informed him that forensic evidence had tied him to the 1966 murder of Everett Delano. Cass continued to deny having ever been to Andover, New Hampshire, or Sanborn's garage. The investigators then executed a search warrant for the property in hopes of finding the murder weapon, but no weapons were found inside the home. 4 days later, the cold case unit was notified by the Vermont State Police that they had been sent to Cass's residence following a 911 call made by Cass's live-in girlfriend. He had committed suicide, shooting himself in the head with a .45 caliber handgun. According to his girlfriend, he had not acted out of character after his last meeting with investigators, but she did see him with a large amount of cash, which he may have used to purchase the gun. He never made any admissions to her about his involvement in the murder. During later meetings with investigators, she said that Cass had believed he was going to be arrested for a cold case on the day that he killed himself. He had also told her that he would not talk about something that did not have a statute of limitations, and that he did not want to go back to prison. While Everett's family was then notified about the fingerprint match and the suicide, the case would remain formally open for another 5 years. It was not until February 20th, 2019, that the Attorney General's office released a report identifying Cass as Everett's killer and formally declaring the case solved and closed. According to Assistant Attorney General Susan Morrill, The case had not been closed in 2014 because of the extensive verification process needed to confirm Cass's involvement and the cold case unit's lack of resources to undertake it. The Delano family then released a statement reading, "Our family would like to take the opportunity to not only thank the initial investigators of our father's homicide, but also the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit. Without their diligent efforts, we would not be here today. We are happy this day has come where our family has been given a small measure of justice. For almost 53 years, our family has wondered what happened on September 1st, 1966. There was a very long time our family didn't know if we would ever receive the answers about what happened that day. Today, our family has the long overdue answers we have been waiting for." 2011 had been a good year for Kevin Drinks, a 50-year-old father and grandfather from Philadelphia. He and his wife Kenya had just purchased their dream house, a twin home with hardwood floors in the Ronhurst neighborhood. Kevin and Kenya had been high school sweethearts who had met in 1978 when they were 16 and 15, respectively. Kevin would take Kenya to her senior prom at Germantown High School, but they broke up shortly after she graduated. Kevin went on to get married, have 3 daughters, and get divorced. When he heard Kenya's mother passed away in 2000, he went to pay his respects and reconnected with Kenya. The couple married the following year. Kevin came from a long line of vocalists and sang gospel songs at his church. He sang Lionel Richie's song Lady as Kenya walked down the aisle at their wedding, inserting her name into the lyrics. Kevin had also gotten a new job. December 10th, 2011 was his 4th day working as a delivery driver for Underground Market Furniture. Just before 6:30 that evening, he was sitting in his delivery vehicle, parked in North Philadelphia. Someone fired multiple shots into the vehicle, with 3 of them striking Kevin. He was rushed to Hahnemann Hospital, but died shortly after he arrived. Kevin's family could not imagine anyone having a motive to kill Kevin. He was a faithful member of his church and loved his family, especially his 5 grandchildren. He had no enemies. His loved ones were upset by whispers that he must have been involved in unsavory or illegal activities for someone to kill him so violently. Kevin's widow Kenya took a very active role in advocating for her husband's case. She almost immediately created buttons that read "Justice for Kevin" and distributed them to her family members. She spent a lot of time in the neighborhood where the murder occurred, passing out flyers and hoping to find witnesses. She organized a vigil and created a reward fund a month after her husband was killed. She spoke to the media about the case, even as it grew colder. Kenya sold the home she and Kevin had just bought, no longer feeling safe there. She continued contacting police about her husband's case over the years, and grew frustrated as they continued to tell her that they had no new information. Kevin's family continued to wear the Justice for Kevin buttons Kenya had made for more than a decade. Finally, on April 4th, 2022, Kenya spoke at a press conference. She instructed the family members who surrounded her to finally take off the buttons, because justice for Kevin had finally been served. That day, 4 men, Chad Rennells, Michael Blackston, Samaj Armstead, and Rayshawn Combs, had been convicted of various murder and conspiracy charges in connection to Kevin's murder. A jury in Philadelphia found Rennells, Blackston, and Armstead guilty of first-degree murder, conspiracy, and several related charges. Combs had been found guilty of third-degree murder and conspiracy. Rennells, Blackston, and Armstead were sentenced to life in prison, while Combs received 2 consecutive 15 to 40-year sentences. Kevin had been killed in a case of mistaken identity. When his family was shown a picture of the man the killers had actually been targeting, they were shocked to see how closely he physically resembled Kevin. The conspiracy that ultimately culminated in Kevin's murder had initially been discovered in 2017, when Philadelphia police detective John Verrecchio listened to recorded jailhouse phone calls from late 2011. Ronells had made one of these phone calls. He was incarcerated at the time because he had been accused of committing a murder 2 months before Kevin was killed. The phone conversation was done in code, but Detective Verrecchio was able to tell that Ronells and his associates were trying to orchestrate the murder of the key witness against Ronells. Based on their description of the witness, the area where he worked, and his vehicle, investigators realized that when the men working with Ronells had gone out looking for their target, they had misidentified Kevin as the witness in the other case. The district attorney's office was able to obtain cell phone data that showed that the killers had followed Kevin around the city for the entire day before he was killed. They also located a cooperating witness to further build the case against all 4 men. They were all arrested for Kevin's murder in 2018. Blackston is also suspected to be involved in at least 5 murders. Following the convictions, Kenya Drinks urged other families with loved ones whose cases had gone cold to continue advocating for them, because their cases could be solved. As for the men convicted of killing her husband, she said, "We know what the Bible says. We know we have to forgive them, but we're working on it, and we'll never forget it." Carla Lowe was kind, generous, and dedicated to her family. She took care of her nieces and nephews while her sister was at work. She was very maternal towards them, putting on magic shows to entertain them, but also making them stand, holding volumes of the encyclopedia as punishment for when they misbehaved. On the morning of November 13th, 1983, Carla's body was discovered in the 1700 block of Depot Avenue in Delray Beach, Florida. Police believe she had been killed while waiting for an Amtrak train at the nearby station. Her younger sister Jackie was supposed to take the train with her, but had changed her mind at the last minute. Carla had been severely beaten and then run over with a truck. Her injuries were so severe that her family was unable to have her casket open at her funeral. It will be 38 years before an arrest was finally made in Carla's case. New technology from British forensic science company Foster and Freeman allowed police to extract and identify a fingerprint on a butter knife found with Carla's body. A match to that fingerprint was on file with police. In November of 2021, a grand jury found that there was sufficient evidence to charge the person whose fingerprint was found at the scene with murder. On November 29, 2021, 59-year-old Ralph Williams was arrested and charged with first-degree murder with a weapon in connection with Carla's murder. His arrest was the first made by the Delray Police Department's cold case unit following its formation in January of that year. Williams had been born just 1 day after Carla in December of 1961. He had been a suspect in her case from the very beginning. The day Carla's body was discovered, Williams had been arrested for unrelated grand theft auto and burglary charges. Other individuals in police custody with him told authorities that he had confessed to Carla's murder to them. When police searched his apartment, they did find a chunk of bloody, reddish hair. They appear to have not viewed this as conclusive evidence, and they did not charge him with Carla's murder at the time. Carla's murder had been reopened in 2005 with the hope that DNA could be found on the evidence from her case, but the effort had been unsuccessful, and the case was closed again. It was opened by the new cold case unit in February of 2021, when the new technology allowed for the fingerprint to be identified and for charges to be filed. While Carla's killer was finally identified and arrested, it is hard to say that Carla and her family got justice, in light of how the criminal case against Williams concluded. Williams and his lawyer negotiated a plea deal, and Carla's family came to the courthouse, with some of them traveling from out of state, to hear him plead guilty and receive his reduced sentence. However, once he got in front of the judge, Williams rejected the plea deal and claimed that he had not received adequate legal counsel from his public defender. He said he planned to pay for a new attorney on his own. Carla's younger sister Jackie said later that she was so angry at seeing the smug look on his face that she thought she was going to pass out in the courtroom. The following day, Williams changed his mind and accepted the plea deal. Instead of first-degree murder, he pled to manslaughter. He was sentenced to 365 days in jail and 10 years of probation. He was given credit for time served since his arrest and left court as a free man that same day. Carla's family is trying to move on, but they do so with a lot of anger over her killer receiving only a slap on the wrist for her murder. In a perfect world, I would have liked him to be brought to trial in 1983 and put to death for what he did to her. But no, he lived 39 years, while she didn't. Carla's sister Jackie told the South Florida Sun-Sentinel.